Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
Just not always the same ones.
I'm Steve Aiken, the editor of Fine Gardening Magazine.
And I'm Danielle Sherry. I'm the senior editor at Fine Gardening Magazine. And we are about to do yet another episode from self-isolation, stay-at-home podcasting world. Are you excited, Steve?
Yeah, I think lo-fi is the new standard. I mean, like even like the local news broadcast this way. All the weather reports are from the dude's kitchen, you know.
Right.
I think, you know, this is Saturday Night Live does it this way. So I think like lo-fi.
So we're on trend is what you're saying. We're on trend.
Well, you know, if eventually the standards will sink low enough, you know.
That we too will be on trend.
That we too will be included in.
Well, so this is interesting because this was actually a substitute topic because we were supposed to be going to the Chelsea Flower Show and recording live for this particular episode. Clearly, that is not happening given current situations and travel restrictions. So instead, we came up with this new topic, which I'm kind of excited about because it's been a while since we've done a color episode. And this is True Blue Beauties, which I'm excited. Are you excited? I can never tell with your face.
It depends. Like how picky are we going to be about how blue these things are?
Oh, I saw your list. I'm going in. I am going in.
You know, I mean, it's blue, purple. They're not very purple, and they're not too blue. I mean, I think they all have blue in their name.
They do. They do.
Yeah, they all have blue in their name, so you lose automatically. I wouldn't call them that, but you know, I mean, real blues are hard to come by in the garden, and I tried to look up why that is, and I have no idea.
Is it hard to breed a true blue flower? I mean, I feel like the first flower that pops to my mind is that blue poppy. Meconopsis. Yeah, which, you know, I have tried multiple times to grow and have killed it every single time. And it ain't cheap either. So that's definitely not one that made my list, but that's such an iconic blue flower. And it's really hard to find anything else that's, you know, kind of fits that bill.
I have a feeling that like you're going to give me a hard time about all my plants not being blue, but being more purple. And then I'm going to go and look at pictures of yours, and it's going to turn out like yours is just as purple as mine.
No, you know what? There's only one. There's only one on your list that I was like, really? But we'll get into it. We'll get into it. So why don't we start with my first plant that you can't have any kind of issue with? And I feel like I've talked about it before, but it is the iconic blue plant in my personal humble opinion, and that's Virginia bluebells, and that's Mertensia virginicana, and it's zones 3 to 8. Okay, you're shaking your head. Spell what species name? Go ahead.
Isn't it just Virginiana? I don't know.
I think it's CA. But we'll put it on our plant list. But anywho, Virginia bluebells, it's a U.S. southeastern native. It's an ephemeral, but it comes out in spring, zones 3 to 8. So, you know, southeastern Connecticut totally does well for me. But it comes out and it does this amazing kind of, it almost looks like romaine lettuce kind of to me, a little bit smoother, these long tongue-like leaves. Early spring, one of the first things to emerge out of the ground, and then all of a sudden shoots up these little stems with these beautiful true blue, cobalt blue, bell-like flowers to it. And I learned that eventually, actually, they emerge pink, and then they fade into blue, which is really, really cool. And then another thing, when I was researching this plant, did you know that it's in the same family as comfrey and pulmonaria, lungwort?
It rings true, so perhaps I read that once, but it never really registered with me.
Totally makes sense to me because the flower structure and the flower color is right on par with both of those plants. I just really, really love it. I had it in my old garden. I transferred, I believe, it's hard to remember, parts of it into my new garden, which is now 7 or 8 years old. And I don't know where it went. So I have a feeling I didn't give it the right conditions because it really likes a partial shade to full sun situation, but it likes moist. And I don't have moist soil in my garden anywhere really. So I have a feeling that was the problem. So I might have to try and find a different spot, maybe on the wooded edge, to reintroduce this plant into my life. But it is a true
So
blue.
so you killed it.
I don't know. Maybe it just didn't like it. It suffered transplant shock. That's what I'm
You
going
killed
with.
it.
No,
You killed it.
no, it was on the plant. It was not my fault. It was not my fault at all. When you kill a
You
plant,
grew
it's
it.
your fault.
It's not there anymore. You killed it. Yeah. Yeah,
Could
it's
be.
dead. It's
Could be.
dead.
Could be.
Um, one of the advantages of working like this is I could immediately Google the Latin name for
Yes.
Virginia bluebells.
Virginiana?
And no, you were right, Virginica.
Yeah, I
So
thought it was
point
Virginica.
point to you. Don't don't they disappear? Aren't they like ephemerals,
No,
like
they are.
bleeding hearts? Like yeah,
Yep, they are
no,
ephemeral.
no, they are. So yes, they are not. Like what's the answer?
Well, had you been paying attention to me, I mentioned that up right at the top that yes, it is an ephemeral. So so after it blooms eventually, it's got a longer span in my experience than bleeding heart does, than dicentra does. It sticks around a little bit longer after it blooms. It's not immediately yellowing out in Dunsville. So I'm going to give it a half a point for that.
Yeah, but you still killed it.
I still killed it. All right.
Yeah. All right. I'm a little scared to go with whatever, because one of these plants, you're lying in wait to pounce on one of these plants, and I don't know what it is. So I'm not sure which one to go with. I kind of want to get it over with, whichever one you. But the first plant I thought of when we said we were doing blue plants was sea holly. The one I like to grow is called big blue sea holly, which is Eryngium zabellii, zones 5 to 9. And this is a plant that has these really spiky bracts on it, and then it has the flower looks like a big thimble. It's one of those round things. It's not quite a cone. It's more like a thimble. And that starts out, I think, like grayish and turns blue, and then the bracts, which again look like daggers radiating out, like they're protecting it from attack. They turn blue, and then the stems turn blue. And it's a really unique looking plant. It always looks amazing. Super easy to grow. Can take it dry. Really likes it dry. Prefers it dry. The deer don't eat it. It's very eye catching, very striking, very sharp. And I think I've mentioned this on the show before, how I planted it next to the pathway, which was a bad idea because the daggers like reach out and stab you. It was just a bad idea. And also it has a very thick, fleshy root to it, which the voles seem to like. I've discovered this spring. They took down a couple of mine, but not all of them. Also because of that root, doesn't really like to be moved. So I tried to move one last year. It was in way too much shade. So it was doing that thing where it flops, because it's in shade, and then it starts growing at a 90-degree angle because it finally found the right amount of sunlight. And so I finally moved it, in the middle of summer, which is the wrong time to do it. And they don't like to be moved. And so I moved it anyway, and then I didn't water it, and now I don't have that one anymore.
So you killed it.
So I killed it. Yeah.
You murdered it.
I'm not afraid to admit it.
You murdered it.
I did.
I think the photo that I pulled of this plant today off the plant database was from your garden, because it was right on the side of a pathway, and it had your initials on it, so I assumed that it was your garden, and that's immediately what I thought. I was like, ooh, I'm like, that will stop the kids from chasing the soccer ball into the garden.
Yeah, luckily it's not that big, but when you walk by it, if you get too close to it, it lets you know.
Grabs you.
Yeah, and it looks great. It starts blooming like mid early summer. I think of it as a summer plant, and then it turns that intense blue, real blue, and it holds that color for a while. Then it turns gray and still looks good. It looks good up until a couple frosts when it starts to get like some brownish tones to it. But yeah, just it looks great all the time. Super easy to grow, unless you have voles.
So I completely feel you on the vole thing. I mean, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, so I wouldn't wish it on you, Steve. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I'm surprised that they went after sea holly, but something that I plan on planting this year that has been vole proof for me. So listen up, and is a true blue. It's an annual. Is baby blue eyes. It has a terrible name. Nemophilia menzii is its botanical name.
Wait a minute,
Yeah,
you're growing that?
yeah, I am. I am
I've
growing it.
I've got some out back. I've been meaning to grow it for a couple of years, and I saw Joseph Tikanovich, who does cartoons for us, does our garden photo of the day. He was posting on Instagram. I'm like, I definitely have to buy that.
So it was one of these plants that probably one of the first true blue plants that I really fell in love with. And I was back in high school. I was working at a garden center, and it was frequently sold as an annual, like a pack annual, super cheap. It's a California native, apparently. I don't know. I mentioned that it's an annual, so it's an annual. It will self-seed though. Likes it hot and dry, well-drained soil, full sun. And that was always why I thought it was a loser plant back when I was working at the garden center, because, the overhead irrigation would take effect in the annual section. And within 2 weeks, Nemophilia, baby blue eyes, looked terrible. It was yellowing out. It was, completely drenched. And that's why it wasn't happy. So in my garden, the last few years, this has been a really good annual filler for me, because it just, kind of thrives in my lean, dry soil, makes kind of this maybe like 6-inch tall and about a foot wide, like billowy ground cover. And then it really does have the perfect common name, because you get this baby blue buttercup daisy looking flower. The inside of it is like a pale light blue or almost a white. And then it's got these little cool stamens right in the middle that are black. So it looks like blue eyes, like little eyeballs, which doesn't sound appealing, but it really, really is. So yeah, I a few years ago, I thought, oh man, maybe I'll mix it up and not just use Cleome that you hate. And I'll try this plant instead. And yeah, my local garden center actually still carries it as a pack annual plant, which it's, I guess, a little on the rarer side, but it's pretty cool. Awesome plant. Totally
Yeah,
awesome plant.
I had to order mine, mail order,
Mm-hmm.
but that's how badly I wanted it. But you say hot and dry. This is supposed to be a spring wildflower. I hear that it's cool season. And I asked Joseph about it, who lives in Virginia, and his have already bloomed and been done. And I asked him, well, how long is it going to last? And he said his, back when he used to live in Michigan or Minnesota or wherever he lived, that his lasted most of the summer for him. Is that?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what mine lasts most of the summer. It's not that annual, it's not the annual that's going to carry you through into fall and the first frost, but it's that annual that bulks up quick, kind of like Nemesia or Diacia, those other annuals that like it a little bit cooler, but we stay cool for so long. It doesn't really start spiking into the 90s. However, it needs full sun. It needs dry soil and well-drained soil. It does not like it wet. So I'm not sure how it would do in a garden, in cooler zones that has actually decent soil that holds moisture.
Hmm.
Mine do much better. They're one of those plants that, I'll put them in one spot, and the next year, if I'm lucky enough that they self-sows itself into a worse condition, like into my gravel pathway or like right on the edge of the driveway, because it seems to that it likes that better drain soil than I'm giving it. Yeah, it's
So it reseeds for you?
a little bit every so often. It's kind of like tall verbena for me. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And this year, after a few consecutive years, it seems like it just sometimes doesn't come back. I haven't seen any little sprouts of it this year from last year's crop. So, yeah.
I've got it growing in a container, but you grow it in the ground.
I grow it in the ground. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's
Because
your
you know
what's
what?
your
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, what's your experience growing annuals in the ground? I always grow them in containers because when I try to grow them in the ground, they don't do very well because I don't water them and I don't feed them. Usually, annuals need a lot of water and a lot of food, and I don't do either of those except in my containers. So,
I mean, I
you know,
feel like over the years, the annuals that I grow, generally, I'm growing tropicals for the most part in my pots.
mhm.
Over the past few years, I'm not doing as many annual container gardens. And the annuals that I grow in the ground. But it's been through trial and error over the years of ones that don't need to be fed, will take my really, really crappy soil, full sun, hot conditions. And you know what? Honestly, if I'm buying them in cell packs and, they've only got a little root system that's, an inch deep, I'll water them for the first couple of weeks just to make sure that they're getting their dose and getting as well established as possible. And then I just let them go. And, Cleome does that for me. Nemophilia does that for me. I can usually get away with, some wave petunias here and there just as like little gap fillers. I know, it's
you
crazy.
you you admit that in public?
I do, because there's nothing like a wave petunia. You can throw that thing in the ground and everybody's like, oh, you have to deadhead it and fertilize it. And I have never done that. And I started doing that because we were being sent so many samples. I didn't want to let them go to waste. So I just chuck them in a space where I was waiting for something to bulk up. And there it went.
No. What you do when they come in? You're like, ew, no one would grow wave petunias. Only bad people grow those, and everybody leaves them there, and then they disappear at the end of the day. And now I know where they're going. They're going into your
Right?
garden.
Exactly. Because I mean,
That's
like,
shameless.
it is shameless, but it's like, hey, throw it in the ground, see if it does anything. And it turns out that a lot of the time they do. Now, I'll tell you, Calibrachoa, it never works out for me. Chucking it in the ground and trying to grow it as like basically a ground cover, it's not happy. Will not do what I need it to do.
Well, speaking of annuals, because I also have an annual on my list. And is this the one that you think is not blue?
No.
You do not think it is blue, or it is not the one that you think is not
It's
blue?
not the one that I'm going to berate you about.
Okay.
So breathe easy.
Okay, but it's like Russian roulette, It's like not this time. It's going to be next time. I'm getting closer. But it had to be 2 years ago when I grew Playin the Blues salvia, which is not technically an annual. It's hardy to zone 7 to 10. So, and I think they sell it as an annual. I got it as an annual. And I was just super impressed with this plant. It's supposed to get 2 to 4 feet tall. That's if you plant it in the ground. But again, I planted it in a container. And it would get these really, really long flower spikes, like up to like 12 inches, just kind of like, wandering away, not straight up like Caradonna salvia, but they would have a little wave to them, or they would bend and curl to them, but up to 12 inches long. And I kept waiting to have to deadhead these things, but they just kept getting longer and longer, and the flower was still, I never needed to deadhead them. And they're absolutely covered in bumblebees. Just a super great plant. Blue to purple flowers, kind of, on the purplish side of blue, but, it says blue in the name, therefore it must have some blue in it. And what it turns out is what happens is, in a salvia, it has the calyx, which is like the little part that holds the flower. By the way, I like this video stuff because now we can do things with our hands and we can show people, there's the calyx. And so when the flower falls out of the calyx stays there, but that calyx is blue.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't look like you've lost a flower. It looks like the flower is still blooming. So no
Which
need to
with
deadhead.
with a lot of salvias, like especially I think a lot of people are familiar with Victoria Blue was the classic. It had a white calyx, so it just looked like a spent flower once that fell out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of annuals that they send up a stalk and they start blooming from the bottom to the top, and so as it gets longer, the top 25% is still in flower, where the bottom 75% is spent, and it looks like hell, like a Cleome.
Not like a Cleome.
Yeah, Cleome has those little, TV antenna things that are sticking out of the spent flowers. It looks awful. Um,
Or beautiful filaments that catch the sunlight and glow.
one person's glowing filaments is another person's TV antenna. But Playin the Blues salvia, just a wonderful, wonderful plant, loaded with bumblebees. You don't have to deadhead it. You don't have to care for it at all. I hope I think they're still selling it. As you know, what happens with annuals, you get it one year, and then you can't find it the next because they've replaced it with something else. But just a wonderful, wonderful blue flower, especially for pollinators. If you're okay with annuals, Playin the Blues salvia. I won't give you its Latin name. No, I will just for fun. It's Salvia longispicata ex Farinacea balsamispum.
Can you spell that cultivar name, please?
Balsamispum is what it is.
Okay. Yeah, it is still for sale because I had to do some research and find some photos of it today. And it is still for sale. And it actually has some online sources too. But, speaking of salvias, it's really worth getting into those, what we call tender salvias, because a couple of years ago, Richard Hawkey from the Chicago Botanic Garden did a salvias article for us on tender salvias. And there are so many beautiful blue salvias, above and beyond Victoria blue and, Playin the Blues.
Black and blue.
Amistad. Yes, that are just, and some of them are just like blue, like ocean blue, as opposed to, more on the purple side.
Okay. So yeah, mine falls short of being blue again. I get the subtext to what you're saying.
Oh, no. It's coming. Just you wait.
What's your favorite song that has blue in the title?
Blue Moon.
That was just the first one you thought of, not your favorite song.
No, since we started thinking about this topic, I've been secretly singing that in my head.
Are you singing the fast version, like the doo-wop version, or are you singing the slower version?
No, the slower version.
Okay.
You know what? Like the version
as performed by who?
Well, now you're just going to make me look like an idiot, but I was thinking about Babe, the movie about the pig, and the blind mice sang Blue Moon, do 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 do. Remember that part of that movie?
Yeah. I never saw it, but that's okay.
That's what I've been picturing. 3 blind mice singing Blue Moon in the movie Babe.
Are you familiar with the band Cowboy Junkies?
Yes, vaguely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On their first and probably best album, they have a song called "Blue Moon Revisited," which you should check out.
All right, yeah. I will Spotify that. I thought you were gonna say, I thought you were gonna do "Tangled Up in Blue."
No, I was going with "Blue Bayou" for some reason.
Okay.
I have Linda Ronstadt on the brain. So,
okay, so you know what's blue other than song titles? Sapphires, a girl's best friend or second best friend next to diamonds. Actually, I would prefer a sapphire. I don't like diamonds. I think we've talked about this before. So
if we were, I wasn't listening. So
feel
free to skip over. Yeah.
Feel free to continue to tune me out, Steve. So my next plant is Sapphire Surf, bluebeard or blue mist shrub. It's a caryopteris. I know that I have, sang the praises. I think of a variegated caryopteris a couple episodes ago. I've talked at length about the chartreuse-leaved caryopteris that I love so much. This is Caryopteris clanadensis Blower splats. Weird. Sapphire Surf is its actual name, and the claim to fame.
Well, hold on.
Yeah,
it's a German name.
Yeah.
So the Blau is the blue.
Okay, you think
or
splats?
Splats must be German for surfing, which means they're not very good at surfing. If they're doing a lot of splats,
So,
come to think of it, how many German surfers, are there that
I have never met a German surfer, but there's always tomorrow.
If you Googled, top surfer in Germany, would you get any hits? Probably not.
It's probably like a snowboarder who once went surfing while visiting California.
We have a German listener, Leo. So if
Oh
Leo, if you're
yeah,
out there, you're listening, and you can tell us if splats equals surf,
we would
or if
appreciate it.
yeah, or if the surfing's any good, in Germany, let us know. Uh,
Or any famous German surfers' names. We would also like to research that as well. So anyway,
he probably threw his headphones down in disgust once we started murdering the German language, and
right.
yeah.
Okay, so this plant, it's a subshrub. It's a dwarf shrub. It's really cool. It's zones 5 to 9. It is deer proof. It is drought proof. It is tolerates lean, poor soil. Just a really, really rugged, tough as nails shrub. And the reason that I'm excited about Sapphire Surf is because it tends to have regular Caryopteris tends to be more on the lavender blue side when it blooms, which by the way is late fall when nothing else is really going on. So this thing blooms in late fall, and
So
it
it's kind of purpley. It's kind of
so
purpley,
wait,
is what you're saying.
normally it is very purpley, but Sapphire Surf, this new variety, is very blue. Very, very blue. Sky blue. Um, and just spectacular. I mean, this thing almost has like these little bluish fireworks that come out of the ends of the stems. For us, generally like mid-September here in Connecticut, but a little bit earlier if you're in a warmer zone. Also, the cool thing about this plant is that the foliage, which you have to live with the other several months of the year, is kind of a lavender gray white with like a little bit of a silver underside to the leaf, and it's a little bit fragrant, which I think is why the deer don't like it, because it kind of does have like that pungent lavendery smell to it if you brush past it. But everybody's always looking for dwarf shrubs that are whackable down to the ground if you want it to be, tolerates really, really crappy conditions. And Caryopteris is it, man. Bluebeard, blue mist shrub, some people call it, but just great. Totally great.
What is it with you and Caryopteris? I
I
grew
love
it
it.
way back in the day. I had like this nice row. I alternated Worcester Gold with whatever the other popular blue
Hmm.
Caryopteris was back in the day. And I remember the advice was to treat it like an herbaceous perennial, to cut it back every spring, cut it back all the way every spring. And I did it for a couple of years, and then maybe like the third year, they started dying. Like I had a couple left, and they're kind of spindly, and then they all gave up the ghost eventually. I never ripped any of them out; they all just kind of disappeared.
Mm.
So I haven't been growing that plant, but you've been in love with it, for years.
I do. I love it. And you know what? Maybe it does not like winter wet. It doesn't like winter moisture. So, I feel like people in areas where, you almost give it too much love, it's not going to do well. And it,
I didn't do that.
but you have much
There's
better
no way.
soil. You have much better soil than I do. So it could be that it just, it did get a little too wet one winter. And I have had one of my Worcester Golds that was in kind of a low lying area on the hillside. It kind of pitted out. We had a really, really wet winter, and half of it died off. So, I cut it all the way back, and back it came again. I will say I think it was the cultivar Jason, which is another yellow leaf form,
Mhm.
succumbed to the voles a couple years ago. So that's pretty unfortunate. But the cool thing is that it had layered itself before the voles got to the main mama plant. So I have a little baby of it on the side. So great, great shrub for layering too.
And do you cut them back every year?
I do, but not all the way back. I kind of treat them like a lavender. So I, shape them down a bit. And then if there's some really, really old woody stems that are, a little bit thicker than my thumb, I take out about a third of those. That's how I treated it. That was just some advice that was given to me by Ed, the master pruner.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Um, is it the grape hyacinth? Is that the one that?
No. Yes. So
What?
so the very last one, I get to just slice you into bits.
No, I don't. You're way off on that one. I don't, but the next plant I was going to mention is blue magic grape hyacinth, which is Muscari ocheri blue magic. Zones 4 to 8. If nobody has or somebody is not familiar with grape hyacinth or Muscari, they're bulbs. You plant them in the fall. They come up in spring. They tend to be blooming like around the time of the last daffodils.
Mhm.
So they're on the later end of bulb season. Right now it is mid-May, and they're still blooming down in the test garden from years ago when I planted them for an article. And the bluest of all of them was Blue Magic. They all tend to be more purpley, and
Mhm.
so I chose Blue Magic because it's more on the blue. You can either get purple, or you can get there's a white, there's one yellow, and there's some that are very baby blue. I didn't
Mhm.
think we were doing baby blue, but of course you proved me wrong on that. So I didn't want to choose those. Valerie Finis, if we were doing baby blue, I would have chosen that one. It's gorgeous. But Blue Magic is probably the bluest of all the grape hyacinths. So think of 6 inch tall Christmas tree shaped flower spike with little blue berries all over it. And that's what you get with this plant. Like I said, they start around the time of daffodils and the last of the daffodils, and they stay up for quite a while. They'll reseed around a little bit. I've seen them popping up in strange places this year, which is cool. Super easy to grow. Give them zero care. They will sport some foliage in the fall, just like this little grassy foliage. It's nothing. Easy to grow. The deer will sample them, but they don't chow them down. They will take a few bites. The voles did not seem to be interested in
No.
them at all. But just a wonderful little cluster of blue beads in spring. Super cheery. Just a great, easy to grow plant. And I can remember my son seeing just the straight Muscari armoniacum, just a regular grape hyacinth when he was little, and walking and saying, "Oh, look, blueberries." And I said, "No, don't eat those.
No.
Don't eat those."
No, no,
Yeah,
no.
but they are blue, and they are a bulb,
They are.
and they are wonderful. And I'm thinking of I could have done some Siberian iris. I could have done some Iris reticulata.
No, 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 no. You have to sit with the choices that you have made. No last minute
And
changes.
and they are good choices. I mean, grape hyacinths are just so cheery in the spring.
No,
I love bulbs.
definitely.
You don't have to worry about them not coming back like you do with tulips. The foliage doesn't hang around forever, in an annoying way like daffodils. So,
So
um,
I was going to ask you about that because back when I think you did the grape hyacinth article, there were some leftover bulbs. I planted them. This was many years ago. They're still going strong. They come and do their thing every spring, but that tuft of grass foliage, grassy foliage that shows up in fall. What do you do with that in the spring? Do you cut that off? Do you leave it? Because it tends to like yellow out and then put on some additional, but the timing is really weird.
if it's yellow, you can cut it back.
But it's
Um,
kind of like mixed in. It's almost like
yeah,
the sedges
yeah,
of bulbs.
yeah. Then don't worry about it. I mean, like I've never had a problem with the foliage. I would say do nothing.
Steve, that should be your motto.
Yes, do nothing. But I don't do anything. But I've tried to kill the muscari in the test garden for a couple years now because it's in the way. It's taking up an entire bed, and I need to plant other things there. And I've been unsuccessful in my attempts to kill it. Um, Today is Thursday. Yesterday on Wednesday, I took a weed whacker to them because they're in the way. I need to plant other things there.
Mhm.
And they're still in bloom. They looked great. I shed a tear while it happened, but they needed to go. I weed whacked them, and you know what?
They're going to
They're going to
come
be back.
back.
They're going to be back next spring.
Yeah, they
You
will.
know, they kind of don't care. They're coming back, and I'm fine with that. But I need the space right now to plant plants.
All right. So we clearly all know the plant of yours that I'm going to take down. But I
Do
want
you
to.
want me to go with that? Do you want me to go with that?
No, no, I'm going. It's my turn. It's my turn. Wait your turn. Wait
Shifting
your
up.
turn.
Well,
So, well, you can't say anything about my next plant because it's the ultimate of all awesome
Wait a minute.
hydrangeas.
Wait a minute. Do you know
No,
I can find the downside of anything. That's my
no, well,
superpower. Is my superpower.
it really is. It really is.
I can ruin anything. So go ahead.
Yes, yes, he can, listeners, in case you were wondering. All right, so listen, this is Bluebird Mountain Hydrangea. It's Hydrangea serrata Bluebird. It is an oldie but goodie. In fact, a couple years ago, my parents were having a holiday party, and one of the guys who ended up being there was one of the biggest breeders and developers of hydrangeas. He happened to be from New Jersey. And we got into a hydrangea conversation. And I basically said, like, hey, what's going on for new hydrangeas? And he told me a little bit. And then he says, yeah, but Bluebird still beats the pants off of them all. Which I thought, holy cow, here's this guy for decades who's been doing hydrangea breeding. And he still says Bluebird is basically awesome. So this is a moderately sized hydrangea. It's about 4 to 5 feet tall and wide, so it's a little bit sizable. It's got the serrata leaf, which is a little bit serrated on the outer edge, more so than the big leaf varieties, hydrangea macrophylla. The claim to fame, and we've talked about it before, both you and I, Steve, is that hydrangea serrata tends to start basically budding out a little bit later than the macrophylla varieties. So the likelihood of frost in the changing climate that we have, zapping those buds and it not blooming is a lot less than, say, with a macrophylla. But a lot of these mountain hydrangeas, hydrangea serrata, get as impressive a bloom. And they bloom at basically the same time as the hydrangea macrophylla. So back to Bluebird. So it is a lace cap variety. The center has fertile flowers or sepals that are blue, 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 like stunning, sparkling ocean around a Greek island blue. And then on the outside, kind of in this Sputnik type fashion, it has these sterile kind of sky blue petals around the outside. So it makes this really, really beautiful blossom all together. You add all those parts up and it gets covered in blossoms, which is so cool. It's so delicate. It adds this beautiful lacy texture to the garden. And you can count on this bad boy to actually bloom for you, which is awesome. Now, they say zones 6 to 9. I have seen it, enjoyed it for many, many years in a zone 5 garden of a friend of mine. So, we'll still go with zone 6 to 9, but this is definitely one that I think that you could bust out of its zone a little bit. Especially in a more protected corner. Hydrangeas, we've said it time and time again, they are listed as full sun. You most likely want to put them in partial shade, hydrangea serrata and hydrangea macrophylla, because they tend to flag if you put them in too much sun. So a partial shade area would be best. And they do like moist, well-drained soil. But just gorgeous. Right, Steve?
Right. My daughter has a friend, and I went to pick her up one day. And these people are not gardeners or anything. And I went to pick her up. On either side of their front door, there were these 2 hydrangea serrata bluebirds, and I'm like, oh my god, do they know what they have here? Like these are gorgeous. I wonder if I can get some cuttings. Oh, I hope they don't ever rip these things out. And I keep meaning to tell them what a wonder they have on their front steps, but it never really seems to come up in conversation. Kind of nobody really cares about. Nobody cares what I think about plants, which is why I started this podcast. But yeah, just a great plant. Probably the biggest downside to that plant is that there's none in my yard.
Yeah.
That's a huge strike against it. But yeah, I shy away from serratas just because they're so close to macrophyllas.
Right? I feel like they get guilt by association almost. And
well, plus my arborescens have sent off so many seedlings. I have so many hydrangeas around
right.
here that I'm kind of sick of them. I started giving them away. That's how many of them there are. But yeah, great plant, great plant. Danielle, do you wear jeans?
I
From
do.
time, yeah. Okay, what color are they?
Oh, all different colors, Steve.
Like,
I
like,
have
like what color? You have black.
like black, like white, like indigo,
Uh-huh.
like
Blue.
no, that's generally called light wash jeans.
Yeah. Do,
Blue
do,
jeans, yes.
yeah, blue jeans. You have blue jeans. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Do you
Hmm.
have any purple jeans?
Oh, I do actually. I do have
And
purple jeans
and how often do you wear them? They're
for
probably pretty rare.
Halloween. For
Yes,
Halloween, when
because
I
they're a little
dress up
weird.
as Prince. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding. No, I do
Uh,
not have purple jeans
yeah. So if this the plant I'm going to talk about wasn't blue, why would they call it blue jean baby?
because they would try to convince people that it's blue, even
Blue
though
blue jean baby Russian sage. Perovskia atriplycifolia atriplycifolia blue jean baby
hmm
is the plant that you are so dead set against me saying that it's blue.
it's not blue, it's purple. Do you know how hard a time I had? I had like a choice from Walter's Gardens, who actually I think developed this plant, sent me all of these photos, and it is a beautiful plant. But I probably had a dozen photos to choose from, and I had the hardest time finding any that looked even remotely blue.
Yeah, the color's off on your computer, obviously. Now, if you ask Walter's Gardens, they will tell you that it is a deeper blue color than other Perovskias, which
That's
tend to
like
be
saying
like lighter, almost lavender, very airy. And this is a much deeper blue color and a much more compact plant than the tall and kind of spindly Russian sage that you get. Blooms from midsummer on. I find it to be a wonderful blue, leaning towards purple plant. Um, Loves dry soil, deer
mm-hmm,
proof. So far, knock on whatever this table is made out of, the voles have left it alone.
mm-hmm.
Just a great low care plant. I wish I had more to. This would have been a great plant for when we talked about plants for massing, because I want to make
Yes,
a mass of this. It would have been great just to have this giant mass of blue flowers, in midsummer to all the way up until fall.
yes.
Just a great low care plant. Um, yeah, great blue plant. Go
Listen,
ahead.
I am not knocking Russian sage as a group of plants. There's been a lot of like newer, more compact varieties that have come out of late. Denim and lace, I think, is another one that's beautiful. It's got more
Yeah,
of dissected leaf to it, so it gives you a little bit more texture.
but
Awesome.
but more lavendery.
They're not blue. None of them are blue. Ain't no blue going on. That's like
Look,
saying my
look,
friend over here who has hazel eyes has more blue eyes than I do. Yeah, but
look.
they still ain't blue. They're hazel. Get over it.
Okay, I don't know what issues you have with this whole eye thing. Apparently, we've touched the nerve. We'll just back away from that. But as gardeners, we have to realize that when we talk about blue, it's hard to actually find blue, as we said at the top of the show.
Yes, but
Really, a lot of these blues are pretty darn purple.
no, that is not the
Yeah,
case. I don't think that there's
it is.
another purple except for maybe your salvia in this whole mix of plants. And that's why the topic was true blue beauties. But that is not a knock against Perovskia because it's a great plant.
Hey,
But
I play by my own rules. Okay, I don't need I don't need you and the man telling me what plants I can and can't do and say that this is blue, but that ain't blue.
you
You're,
know,
you're,
go ahead.
I was going to make a brown eyes blue joke, but
I would be
it
very
wasn't going to work.
offended about that. you know what man can tell us what to do
What?
and might be able to weigh in on this.
I'm talking about the man.
You know who's our man though? The man
Who?
is Peter.
Oh,
Peter. We're going to see what Peter has to say about blue.
okay. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to explain why Steve is right.
I once took some paint swatches from the hardware store, cut off the bottoms where the names are, and asked 3 of my most opinionated friends to identify what colours they were looking at. It was a big mistake, because an argument erupted immediately over which swatch was tan, which was beige, and which was khaki. I was able to gain control of the conversation and convince them to release the sharp objects and fistfuls of hair from their grip. Then, after moving the sharp objects out of reach, I informed them that they were all incorrect. None of them had correctly identified sandcastle, latte, or chipmunk. Colour is a tricky thing with little solid ground to stand on. As most of us know, there are 3 primary colours: blue, red, and yellow. Everything else is a mix of other colours. It is helpful to remember that colour is a continuum. As red moves toward yellow, we get orange, which is half of each of those primary colours. But if the colour is 51% red and 49% yellow, you have a different colour. Midway between blue and red sits purple, a common colour in the garden. Any colour between purple and blue has more blue in its makeup than any other colour. So someone calling a flower whose colour is on the blue side of purple blue is technically safe to call it blue. But at what point does blue become purple? Who is to say? When does warm become hot? When does tan become beige? Perhaps the names of colours don't matter, as long as you like what you see.
Okay, Danielle, you're probably just going to want to move quickly on and forget all about...
I call foul. I think there was like some, I don't know, cahooting with Peter on the side.
Well, I'll tell you who I have been cahooting with, and that's this episode's expert.
Let's see who we've got.
Hi, my name is Dan Robarts, and I am the grower, propagator, and horticultural research manager at the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens in Booth Bay, Maine. Today I wanted to discuss some of my favorite blue flowering perennials. And these really are the holy grails of a lot of horticulturalists, representing less than 10% of the maybe 300,000 flowering plant species. Blue flower taxa are highly prized. While there are plenty of blue flowered annuals like lobelia, centuria, nigella, and woody plants, as many people think of hydrangeas, we're going to stick to perennials for today. One of my favorite perennial ground covers for a shady spot surprisingly comes from the borage or forget-me-not family. Many plants in this group have blue flowers, and the family as a whole gets a bad rap for being kind of weedy, as a lot of the shorter-lived annuals, biennials, perennials can be heavily reseeding. But the creeping forget-me-not, or Omphalioides verna, is really a treasure for a shady garden. Hardy in zones 5 to 7, let's say, this slow creeping ground cover has stems just below the surface, producing leaves and flowers maybe 6 to 8 inches high. In late spring, this plant will reward you with fantastic displays of blue flowers, again, the traditional borage forget-me-not look, anywhere from a soft sky blue to a deep royal blue. A fantastic plant if you can find it. It is not commonly available, but I don't know why. It should be. It is really a fantastic plant for the garden. Another spectacular blue-flowered perennial that I really don't think I could be without comes from plant breeding guru Daryl Probst, famous for bringing epimediums and coreopsis into the limelight in the last few decades. Gentiana True Blue, a hybrid this gentleman created, is really a fantastic garden plant. A small vase-shaped clump growing maybe a foot to 8 inches tall thrives in full sun to part shade. The impetus of creating this hybrid was actually to try to get a gentian with a longer bloom time, as many of the species Daryl tried in his Massachusetts home were relatively short-lived, and he was then left with a clump of green. Tubular, true blue flowers kind of unfurl beautifully in early midsummer up and down the stems for an extended bloom. This is widely available, more so than almost all the other gentians that are in the trade, and I would highly recommend this for a sunny spot. It really doesn't take up a lot of room. It is not a creeper, a reseeder, or really aggressive in any shape, way, or form. It stays stately and beautiful blue where you put it, and it's really worth finding. A newer addition to my perennial blue repertoire includes a selection of the Eastern Blue Star, Amsonia tabernaemontana, called Storm Cloud. This cultivar was selected by the fantastic breeding team at Walter's Gardens, led by Hans Hansen. And this native perennial does well in zones 4 through 9, thriving in full sun. This is another nice clumper, so don't expect it to appear all over your garden, which is nice in my opinion. It tolerates drier, depleted soils, a bonus for sites that are somewhat marginal. But the real claim to fame to this is not the powdery blue flowers you get early summer, but it's actually the foliage. Interestingly, in spring, it emerges a very, very black greenish color. It's quite striking in the landscape. As stems come up, they are really dark colored. Even as leaves emerge and plant comes into bloom, they still are notably dark. Though not a small plant as the other ones I've discussed today, this one gets to be about 3 feet and be a big black-stemmed bushy clump. But this profuse flowering in the midsummer and its capacity to tolerate lesser desirable conditions, let's say, really makes it a valuable choice. This one may not have great distribution as yet, but I would highly recommend looking for it or asking your local nursery if they can pick it up. Again, that's Amsonia tabernaemontana, Storm Cloud. So in these blue perennials, I'm really trying to cover all my bases, seasons, and plant types, so I've got to throw some kind of bulbous perennial in here too. And my pick is for the very early season, going with Glory of the Snow, Chinodoxa luciliae. There are many blue cultivars out on the market right now, and I think they're all quite lovely, so I'm not going to suggest any one in particular, not knowing what's going to be available in anyone's region. But this is a perennial bulb in zones 3 through 8, and quite diminutive at 4 to 6 inches tall, though I've always seen it to be on the shorter side of that. Very adaptable in terms of sun or shade, grows well all around, though I have seen it move around the garden a little bit after initial plantings, and I'm not sure that's a function of gardeners kind of picking off little bulbs and doing weeding as they're relatively superficial, or our dear friends the squirrels picking them up and putting them where they deem best. But anyway, this plant, the Glory of the Snow, I think is really spectacular in the early garden and not as aggressive as some other blue-flowered plants, Siberian squill. I find that moves around the garden all over the place and can be quite a bit weedy, though bees do appreciate the early season pollen. But Glory of the Snow also has a significantly larger flower, which from the throat radiates from white out to blue, which I think gives it a lot more pop in the landscape, unlike the darker flowered blue squills, for example, which are kind of much more monochromatic. But anyway, this is worth checking out. And again, a handful of cultivars out there, and they're relatively inexpensive for these little bulbs, and they can be very, very long-lived. A great choice for the early season. In a discussion of blue perennial flowers, one would certainly be remiss if not mentioning the fantastic blue poppies originating from the Himalaya, and that's referring to specifically the genus Mechanopsis. Before I start pouring on all the accolades, as this is by far my favorite selection of the blue flowers we're talking about today, it is by far the most fussy as well. While it can be grown in zones 4 through 7, let's say, it really does not tolerate summer heat. It likes acid soil, but it's fairly adaptable, liking a lot of moisture during the growing season, but also not a lot of moisture during the winter. These are susceptible to rot in an overly moist condition when plants are not actively growing. That said, if you can find one somewhere, it would be well worth adding to your garden if you could find it a nice little spot. I found the most long-lived of the species and hybrids I've tried is a selection called Lingholm. It's fantastic sky blue flowers. This plant thrives in half-day sun, but can tolerate full sun if it's kept moist. Again, this is maybe not in all garden centers, as it is hard to maintain even in the ground, let alone in a pot. But I found that this Lingholm strain is very easy to start from seed and to grow on. So if you're willing to go that route, I would highly recommend it. There's almost nothing as rewarding as growing your own plants from seeds, and I found that these Mechanopsis Lingholm are quite easy for that. So if you can find them online, which should be easily done, I would highly recommend it. There is nothing that compares to the color of this group of plants, and Lingholm is my favorite of the bunch.
Danielle, I hope this whole episode hasn't given you the blues.
No, the episode hasn't given me the blues, Steve. You have.
Oh.